Blue wire or red? We don't have time for a debate, ma'am. Corporal Miller's voice cracked, his hands trembling over the exposed circuitry of the IED strapped to the embassy's main server rack. Sweat dripped from his nose onto the plastic casing. It's neither, the woman said. Her voice was low, stripped of panic, contrasting sharply with the chaos of gunfire erupting 2 floors down. She didn't look at the bomb. She was watching the stairwell door, her grip tight on a stolen Mk-18 rifle. It's a mercury tilt switch with a collapsing circuit. You cut a wire, we vaporize. You're a damn analyst. You don't know. Miller, look at the solder points. She cut him off, her eyes never leaving the door. The heat shrink is fresh on the bypass. If you don't bridge the connection before you pull the detonator, this room becomes a crater. I can't do that. My hands are shaking. The door handle turned. The wood splintered as a boot kicked it from the outside. Move, she said. Not a request. She slid across the floor, shoving the young corporal aside. In one fluid motion, she holstered the rifle, drew a combat knife, and jammed the tip into the circuit board, shorting the lead. Click. The timer died. The door exploded inward. Pick up your weapon, Marine, she whispered, standing up to face the smoke. School's out. 36. Hours earlier, Fob Granite, undisclosed location in North Africa. The desert heat at FOB Granite didn't just warm you, it cooked you slowly, layer by layer, until patience was the first casualty. Sarah Jenkins pushed the heavy laundry cart through the narrow corridor of the Tier 1 barracks. The wheels squeaked, a rhythmic, irritating re that echoed off the cinder block walls. At 52, Sarah moved with a deliberate, heavy gait that suggested arthritic knees and a lifetime of low-wage labor. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe, fraying bun, and her eyes were usually fixed on the floor. That was the camouflage. The floor was where people expected her to look. If she looked up, they might see that her irises were scanning sectors, checking corners, and assessing threat levels. They might notice she walked silently despite the heavy boots. "Move it, Grandma," a voice barked. Sarah stopped. She didn't flinch. 3 operators from Echo Team strode down the hall, smelling of CLP gun oil, stale sweat, and adrenaline. They had just returned from a light patrol outside the wire, a euphemism for driving around villages and scaring locals. Leading them was Sergeant Kovich, 26 years old, built like a tank turret, with a beard that was technically out of regulation but ignored because he was the unit's heavy hitter. Sarah shifted the cart to the right, pressing herself against the wall to maximize the clearance. Standard de-escalation. Make yourself small. Kovich didn't adjust his path. He walked straight into the cart. The collision wasn't violent, but it was calculated. The cart spun, spilling neatly folded towels and tactical socks onto the dusty concrete. "Damn it!" Kovich sneered, looking down at the mess as if the laundry had attacked him. "Watch where you're going. This is an area of operations, not a nursing home." His 2 squad mates, Miller and Davis, chuckled. It was a nervous, sycophantic sound. They were waiting to see how far Kovich would push it. "Apologies, Sergeant," Sarah said. Her voice was raspy, flat. She bent down immediately to start gathering the towels. Her hands moved efficiently. Left hand secures, right hand stacks. "Leave it," Kovich said, stepping on a white towel with his dusty boot. He ground the dirt into the fabric. "You missed a spot anyway. Needs to be re-washed." Sarah paused. Her hand hovered inches from his boot. In her mind, the sequence played out in less than a second. Grab the ankle. Twist the tibia until it snaps. Requires 14 pounds of pressure. Drive the shoulder into his knee. Dislocate. Use his falling weight to shatter the hyoid bone in his throat. It would take 3 seconds. Kovic would be eating through a straw for 6 months. But the mission wasn't Kovic. The mission was the contract. She was here as a civilian logistical monitor to track unexplained discrepancies in the base's armory inventory. Discrepancies that pointed to a high-level leak. Breaking a sergeant's leg would end her access. Sarah retracted her hand. She stood up slowly, her joints popping audibly. "I will take care of it, Sergeant," she said, keeping her eyes on his chest rig. "Please excuse me." Kovic stepped closer, invading her personal space. He was a foot taller, looming over her. He smelled of chewing tobacco and aggression. "You don't belong here, Jenkins. You're a liability. One day the alarm's gonna sound, and you're gonna freeze, and one of my boys is gonna take a bullet trying to save your wrinkly ass." "I know the protocols, Sergeant," she said softly. "Protocols?" Kovic laughed, a harsh bark. "Paperwork isn't war. Do us a favor. Stay in the supply closet. Stay invisible. Or better yet, RTB, return to base. Go home." He shoved the cart again, harder this time, sending it crashing into the opposite wall. Then he brushed past her, his shoulder checking hers hard enough to make her stumble. Miller and Davis followed, avoiding eye contact with her now. Sarah stood alone in the hallway. She didn't rub her shoulder. She didn't cry. She watched Kovic's reflection in the safety glass of the fire extinguisher case on the wall. She noted his gait, heavy on the right side, favoring an old injury. She noted the way he checked his peripheral vision poorly. She bent down, picked up the soiled towel, and placed it in the dirty bag. "Clear," she whispered to herself. She pushed the cart forward. The squeaking wheel resumed its rhythm. She had to finish the inventory before 1900 hours. The missing crate of MK255 explosive rounds wasn't going to find itself, and if her suspicions were right, Kovic's bullying was the least of their problems. The wolves were already inside the fence. They just hadn't started howling yet. The locker room smelled of wet concrete, menthol muscle rub, and the copper tang of dried blood on discarded gear. Steam rolled out from the adjacent showers, creating a thick, humid haze that clung to Sarah's uniform. She was on her knees, scrubbing a mud stain off the tile near the bench row. It was menial work, the kind designed to make a person feel small. Sarah focused on the grout. Scrub, rinse, repeat. In her mind, she wasn't cleaning. She was calibrating. The acoustics in the room were terrible. Hard surfaces everywhere. A gunshot here would be deafening. A knife fight would be slippery. The heavy metal door banged open. Sarah didn't look up. She knew the heavy tread of the boots. Kovic, Miller, and Davis. They had bypassed the chow hall and come straight here, likely to debrief the unofficial way, with whiskey hidden in their lockers and complaints about command. "I'm telling you, LT is soft," Miller was saying, his voice echoing. "We should have pushed into the wadi we had eyes on. LT follows the ROE, Miller." "Don't be stupid," Kovic grunted. Locker doors slammed open. The sound of Velcro tearing and heavy plates hitting the bench filled the space. Sarah stood up, gathering her bucket. "I will finish this later, gentlemen." "No," Kovic said. The single word hung in the damp air. He was stripped down to his coyote brown t-shirt and trousers, his arms thick with muscle and covered in dust. He turned slowly, blocking the exit path. Miller and Davis flanked him, leaning against the lockers, towels draped over their shoulders like Roman senators. They were grinning. You don't leave until the job is done, Kovic said, stepping closer. That floor is still dirty. I need to restock the supply closet, Sergeant, Sarah replied, her voice steady, eyes lowered to his sternum. You need to do what you're told. Kovic kicked the bucket. Water sloshed out, soaking Sarah's boots and the hem of her pants. It was a petty, childish escalation. It was also dangerous. In the wild, a predator toys with prey to test for weakness. Kovic was testing her submission. Sarah didn't step back. She couldn't. The row of lockers was directly behind her. Clean it up, Kovic ordered. I will get a mop, she said, moving to step around him. Kovic moved faster than a man his size should. He slammed his hand against the locker next to her head, the metal booming like a gong. He leaned in, pinning her in the narrow space between his arm and the steel wall. The heat radiating off him was suffocating. You think you're better than us? He hissed, his face inches from hers. Walking around like a ghost, writing in your little clipboard. I see you watching, Jenkins. You think because you're a civilian, you're untouchable. Sarah looked up. For the first time, she met his eyes directly. Her internal HUD lit up. Target proximity, 12 inches. Threat level, yellow-red. Option A. Palm strike to chin, chin jab. Rupture tongue, drive jaw into skull. Lethal. Option B. Knee to perineal nerve. Drop and choke. Incapacitate. Option C. Do nothing. I don't think anything, Sergeant, she said. Her pulse was resting at 58 beats per minute. Bullshit, Kovic spat. He pressed his forearm against her shoulder, pinning her harder against the vents of the locker. The metal dug into her spine. You look at us like we're children playing with guns. You think you know something we don't? Miller laughed from the sidelines. Give her a break, Sarge. She's just an old lady. She's a leech, Kovic growled. Sucking up budget that should go to gear. You want to be here? Then shut up and take it. Take the dirt. Take the orders. Take the reality that you are nothing without us protecting you. He leaned his weight onto her, trying to provoke a flinch, a tear, a gasp of fear. Sarah let him. She went limp against the locker, absorbing the pressure rather than fighting it. It was a judo principle applied to psychology, ju no ri, yield to conquer. But she didn't look away. She held his gaze with a flatness that was terrifyingly empty. There was no fear in her eyes. There was no anger. There was only the deep, cold void of a woman who had killed men in silence, while Kovic was still learning to walk. Kovic blinked. For a microsecond, the predator realized he was staring into an abyss. The hairs on his arms stood up. He didn't know why, but a chill cut through the steam. He saw something in the gray of her eyes, a shark moving in deep water. He pulled back abruptly, breaking the tension. He scoffed, trying to cover his sudden unease. Clean this mess up, Kovic muttered, turning his back on her to hide his confusion. And get out of my sight. Yes, Sergeant. Sarah knelt down into the spilled water. She dipped her rag. She started to wipe. Kovic watched her reflection in the mirror as he peeled off his shirt. He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a phantom sensation, like a crosshair had just drifted off his spine. Weird bitch, Davis whispered. Secure that talk, Kovic snapped, louder than necessary. Sarah finished the floor. She picked up her bucket. As she walked out, she didn't hurry. She didn't shake. She moved with the smooth, predatory grace of a creature that had just decided not to feed. Not yet. Fob Granite slept with one eye open, bathed in the sickly amber glow of sodium security lights. At 0200 hours, the heat finally broke, leaving behind a dry, static-charged chill that settled over the sandbags. Sarah moved through the supply depot, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. To the casual observer, she was the insomniac laundry lady rechecking stock sheets. In reality, she was hunting a ghost in the machine. The missing crate of Mk255 Mod 0 rounds, specialized frangible ammunition used for close-quarters battle on steel targets, was the thread. Now, she had to pull it. She stopped at the heavy steel door of the logistics server node. Inside, a single MP, Private Lewis, sat with his boots up on the desk, scrolling through a tablet. The blue light illuminated a face bored to the point of stupor. "Authorized personnel only, ma'am," Lewis said without looking up, his voice thick with fatigue. "I have a discrepancy in the hygiene requisitions, Private," Sarah said, her voice pitching up into a worried grandmotherly warble. "If I don't reconcile the toilet paper inventory by morning, Colonel Vance will have my head. I just need to check the digital manifest for 5 minutes." Lewis sighed, dropping his feet to the floor. "Hygiene recs? At 2 in the morning? Old women don't sleep well, son, and the Colonel doesn't forgive well." Lewis rolled his eyes, typing in his passcode. "Make it quick, and don't touch the classified logs. I'm watching you." "Thank you, dear." Sarah slipped past him to the terminal. She didn't open the hygiene folder. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, using shortcuts that didn't exist in the standard manual. She bypassed the supply interface and dove straight into the perimeter defense logs. She wasn't looking for what was there. She was looking for what was missing. The screen flickered with streams of data from the thermal cameras positioned along the northern wadi, the blind side of the base. The logs showed all clear for the last 6 hours. Green check marks all the way down. Too clean. Sarah narrowed her eyes. She pulled up the raw video feed history for Sector 4. She watched the timestamp. 42:15. A desert fox scurried across the sand. She skipped forward to 01:43:15. The same fox, same gait, same pixelation artifact near the tail. She checked 01:44:15. The fox again. It wasn't a quiet night. It was a loop. Someone with root access had hacked the Physical Security Information Management (PSIM) system, feeding a looped recording to the guard posts. The base wasn't just vulnerable, it was blind. The northern perimeter could be wide open, and the Command Operations Center, COC, would still be seeing empty sand. "You find your toilet paper yet?" Lewis called out, spinning in his chair. "Almost done," Sarah replied. Her heart rate didn't spike. She hit a sequence of keys to purge her search history, leaving only the hygiene file open on the screen. This wasn't theft. This was preparation for a slaughter. The Mk255 rounds weren't stolen to be sold. They were stolen to be used inside the base, where ricochets off concrete walls were dangerous to the shooter. Frangible ammo meant the attackers planned to fight indoors, in the barracks. Sarah closed the terminal. "Thank you, Private. You've been very helpful." Yeah. Close the door on your way out." Sarah walked out into the cool night air. The silence of the desert felt heavy now, pregnant with violence. She didn't go to her quarters. She went to the janitorial closet in Block C, the one marked out of order. She unlocked the door and stepped into the smell of bleach and dust. Behind the shelves of cleaning chemicals, she pried loose a ventilation grate near the floor. She reached into the darkness and pulled out a black, waterproof hard case. It wasn't government issue. It was personal stock. She cracked the seal. Inside lay a Sig Sauer P226 Legion, a suppressor, 3 spare magazines loaded with hollow points, and a combat knife with a worn leather grip. It was a meager loadout against an assault force, but it was better than a clipboard. She strapped the holster to her thigh, pulling her baggy cargo trousers over it to conceal the bulk. She slid the knife into her boot. 36 hours, she whispered to the empty room. That was her estimate for how long it would take for a standard insurrectionist group to organize. But if they had hacked the thermals, they were already here. She checked her watch. Road 215 Zulu. Across the compound, a single flare popped into the sky. Not a military illumination round, but a crude red signal flare. It began. Dawn broke over Fob granite like a bruise, purple and swollen with heat. The air in the mess hall smelled of reconstituted eggs and bad coffee, the universal scent of military mornings. Sarah sat alone at a corner table nursing a cup of black tea. She wasn't eating. Her eyes were fixed on the digital clock above the serving line. 05:28. Under the table, her hand rested on her thigh, feeling the reassuring weight of the SIG P226 strapped beneath her baggy cargo pants. Most of the support staff were laughing, clanking trays, complaining about the heat. At the table near the exit, 3 members of Echo Team, Miller, Davis, and a newbie named Gomez, were arguing about sports, dressed in gray physical training, PT gear. Kovic wasn't there. He was likely already in the gym, punishing iron to work off his anger. 5:29. The first sound wasn't an explosion. It was a whistle, a short, sharp intake of breath from the sky. Sarah didn't freeze. She didn't look up. She slid out of her chair and under the heavy oak table in one fluid motion. Crump. The impact shook the floorboards. Dust rained from the ceiling tiles. It wasn't close enough to blow the windows, but it was close enough to wake the dead. Incoming! 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 The bass siren wailed, a mechanical scream that cut through the stunned silence of the mess hall. Panic erupted. Chairs flipped, trays clattered. Men and women scrambled for the exit, driven by the lizard brain instinct to run. Sarah stayed low. She counted. 1, 2, 3, boom, boom. 2 more mortar rounds walked across the compound, closer this time. The walking pattern. They were bracketing the barracks. Stay down, Sarah yelled, her voice cutting through the noise with command authority. Get away from the glass. Few listened. They were stampeding toward the door. Then the world turned white. A massive concussion wave hit the building, far larger than a mortar. The shock wave punched through the walls, shattering every window in the chow hall instantly. Glass shards sprayed across the room like diamond dust. The main gate. It had to be a VBIED, a truck bomb. The thermal loop. They had driven a truck right up to the gate while the guards watched a recording of a fox. Sarah crawled out from under the table. The air was thick with pulverized concrete and the acrid taste of sulfur. Alamo! Alamo Black! Someone was screaming over the PA system, but the voice cut out halfway through. The power died. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a hellish red glow. Sarah moved. She didn't run with the herd. She sprinted toward the rear exit, heading for the Ready Room Annex. She needed to get to the secondary weapons cache before the perimeter was fully breached. She burst into the courtyard. Black smoke billowed from the north, blotting out the sun. Small arms fire erupted. The distinct crack-crack of AK-47s answering the deeper thud-thud of the few sentries still alive. She reached the heavy blast door of the Ready Room. This was where the Quick Reaction Force, QRF, kept their gear. Echo Team would be heading here to suit up. She slapped her hand on the biometric scanner. Access denied. System lockout. No, she hissed. She tried the manual keypad override. System lockout. The lights on the panel were a solid, unblinking red. It wasn't a malfunction. It was a hard command sent from the server node. The traitor hadn't just blinded them. He had disarmed them. Sarah looked across the courtyard toward the gym. Through the haze, she saw Sergeant Kovic and the rest of Echo Team spilling out of the fitness center. They were massive, terrified targets, wearing shorts and t-shirts, covered in sweat, and completely unarmed. They were running toward the ready room, toward her, expecting guns, expecting armor, expecting a fight they could win. They didn't know the door was a brick wall. Bullets began to zip across the open ground, kicking up spurts of sand near Kovic's feet. The insurgents were already inside the wire. Sarah looked at the keypad, then at the approaching team. She looked down at her leg, where the only gun in this sector was hidden. The invisible woman had to make a choice: stay gray and survive alone, or break cover and herd these sheep before the wolves tore them apart. "Get back!" she screamed, waving her arms, abandoning the shadows. "The door is dead! Get back to the gym!" Kovic saw her. He looked confused, angry, and for the first time in his career, utterly defenseless. He didn't stop. He was running on reflex, thinking he could force the door. "Go back, you idiot!" Sarah roared, drawing the P226. She raised the weapon, not at the enemy, but fired a round into the dirt 3 feet in front of Kovic. The crack of the pistol froze him. He stopped, skidding in the gravel, staring at the laundry lady standing in the combat stance of a Tier 1 operator. A suppressed pistol locked in her grip, her eyes burning through the smoke. "Ambush right!" she yelled, pointing her weapon toward the breached wall. "Move!" The warning shot into the dirt had done its job. Kovic and his team scattered, diving behind the concrete planter boxes outside the gym, just as the heavy machine gun fire from the breached wall began to chew up the courtyard. Sarah didn't stay to babysit them. She knew the layout of the base better than the architects. If the main force was hitting the courtyard, a kill team would be circling around the north side of the gymnasium to flush the defenders out. She pivoted on her heel, her boots gripping the loose gravel, and sprinted toward the side maintenance door of the gym. "Jenkins, where the hell are you going?" Kovic roared over the din of gunfire. She ignored him. Speed was security. She kicked the maintenance door open and slipped into the dark, cool hallway that ran behind the weight room. It smelled of rubber mats and stale sweat. The power was out here too, leaving the corridor in a gray twilight illuminated only by the emergency strobes pulsing at the far end. Breath in, breath out. Focus, front sight. The years fell away. The arthritis in her knees, the stiffness in her back. Adrenaline masked it all. She wasn't Sarah the laundry lady anymore. She was Trident 1 actual. Movement ahead. At the T-intersection of the hallway 30 meters down, a figure sprinted into view. It was Private Henson, a 19-year-old admin clerk. He was unarmed, his eyes wide with terror, scrambling on the linoleum floor in his socks. "Help! They're inside!" Henson screamed, seeing Sarah. He scrambled toward her, waving his arms. Behind him, 2 shadows detached themselves from the gloom. Insurgents. They wore mismatched fatigues and green headbands. They raised their AK-47s, eager to cut down the fleeing boy. Sarah didn't shout a warning. Warnings took time. She dropped into a modified crouch, bringing the suppressed P226 up. Her grip was high and tight, driving the gun out. She didn't close one eye. She kept both open, superimposing the tritium front sight over the chest of the lead gunman. Target 1. Range, 25 meters. Moving target. Pft, pft. The suppressor spit 2 rounds in rapid succession, a controlled pair. The lead insurgent's chest exploded. The hollow points mushroomed on impact, transferring all their kinetic energy into the sternum. He didn't fall backward. He folded forward, like a marionette with cut strings, dropping instantly without firing a shot. The second gunman paused, confused by the quiet death of his partner. That hesitation was his obituary. Sarah shifted her aim. Smooth transition, no wasted movement. Target 2. Range 25 meters. Static. Pfft, 1 round, headshot. The gunman dropped. Henson, still running, skidded to a halt 5 feet from Sarah. He looked back at the 2 bodies crumpled in the hallway, then up at the gray-haired woman holding a smoking pistol. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving, snot running down his nose. Mrs. Jenkins? He stammered. You just... Sarah didn't look at him. She stepped past him, moving toward the bodies. She kept her weapon trained on them, scanning for movement. "Dead check," she whispered. She nudged the first body with her boot. Nothing. She checked the second. Clear. She bent down and ripped the AK-47 from the dead man's grip. She checked the magazine, full, and racked the charging handle to ensure a round was chambered. She slung it over her shoulder. Then she grabbed the chest rig off the corpse, tearing the Velcro straps loose. She turned back to Henson. The boy was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "Henson," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of the grandmother tone she had used for months. It was cold steel. "Look at me." He stared at her, paralyzed. "Are you hit?" He shook his head mutely. "Good. Take this." She shoved the blood-stained chest rig into his arms. "Put it on. It has magazines. You're going to carry them for me." I'm admin, ma'am. I don't..." Sarah grabbed him by the collar of his t-shirt, pulling him close. Her eyes bored into his. "Today, everyone is infantry. You stay on my hip. You move when I move. If you freeze, you die. Do you understand?" Henson nodded, terrified not of the enemy, but of the woman he had once seen knitting in the break room. "Good," she said, releasing him. "Now let's go save the loudmouths." She moved to the double doors leading into the main gym floor. She could hear shouting inside, Kovich's voice. They were trapped. Sarah checked the door handle. Locked. She stepped back and aimed the P226 at the lock mechanism. "Plug your ears, kid," she said. Pfft, pfft. The lock shattered. Sarah kicked the door open and swept into the room, the ghost fully resurrected, bringing violence to the men who had thought they were the only predators in the food chain. The gymnasium was a cavern of echoing panic. The air conditioning had died with the power, and the smell of fear, sharp, acidic sweat, was already overpowering the scent of floor wax. Sarah kicked the double doors shut behind her and Henson. "Barricade this! Now!" she ordered, her voice cracking like a whip. Henson, trembling under the weight of the blood-soaked chest rig, scrambled to drag a heavy dumbbell rack across the door. Inside the main gym floor, Echo Team was scattered like cockroaches caught in the light. They were crouched, behind weight benches and overturned mats, clutching whatever heavy objects they could find. Dumbbells, weight plates, a breaker bar. It was pathetic. Against 7.62mm rounds, a 20-pound plate was just extra shrapnel. "Jenkins?" Sergeant Kovich stood up from behind the squat rack. He was pale, his chest heaving. He looked at Sarah, then at the smoking pistol in her hand, then at the AK-47 slung over her shoulder. His brain seemed to misfire, unable to reconcile the image of the subservient woman he had bullied yesterday with the blood-spattered operator standing before him. "What the hell is going on?" Kovich demanded, stepping forward. "Give me that weapon." It wasn't a question. It was an instinct. He was the team leader. She was the civilian. In his world, guns belonged to him. He reached for the AK-47 on her shoulder. Sarah didn't argue. She moved. She stepped inside his reach, jamming the muzzle of her pistol hard into his sternum, right between the plates of muscle he had spent years building. The impact knocked the wind out of him. "Touch my weapon, and I will put you down, Sergeant," she hissed. The threat was quiet, intimate, and absolutely sincere. Kovic froze, his hand hovering in midair. The gym went silent. Miller and Davis, crouched nearby, stared with their mouths open. "You want to play command later? Fine," Sarah said, not backing down an inch. "Right now, you are unarmed, unarmored, and about 30 seconds away from being flanked by a heavy machine gun team setting up in the courtyard. So you will listen to me." "Who are you?" Kovic whispered, looking at her eyes. The gray shark eyes. "I'm the only reason you're still breathing," she replied. She shoved him back, creating space. "Status?" Kovic blinked, shaking his head to clear the shock. The soldier in him rebooted, overriding the ego. "We're Winchester. No weapons, just gym gear. We were heading to the ready room when the door locked us out." "The armory is compromised. The traitor locked it remotely," Sarah said, scanning the upper windows. "We need to move. This room is a kill box. If they bring up an RPK or an RPG, we're done." "Move where?" Miller asked, his voice shrill. "The courtyard is a shooting gallery." "Secondary armory, Annex B," Sarah said. "It's analog, keypad entry. No network connection." "That's across the open ground," Kovic argued, his face flushing red. "We can't cross that without cover fire. We need to hold here." "Holding here is suicide," Sarah cut him off. She pointed to the main glass entrance of the gym. "That glass isn't ballistic. Once they realize you're trapped, they won't breach. They'll just spray the room until it's quiet." She turned to the rest of the team. "Grab the benches. Stack them in a fatal funnel at the north entrance. Force them to come through the single door. Kovic, Miller, grab the heaviest plates you can find. If they breach before we move, you throw them. Aim for the head." "Throw weights?" Kovic scoffed. "Are you serious? Do you have a better plan, Sergeant? Or do you want to stand there and bleed?" Kovic's jaw tightened. He looked at his men, then back at the woman who had cleaned his locker room floor 12 hours ago. He saw the way she held the pistol, high compressed ready, finger indexed, scanning. She wasn't guessing. She was working a problem. "Do it!" Kovic barked at his team. "Miller, Davis, stack the benches. Gomez, watch the rear." The team moved. It was messy, but it was action. Sarah turned to Henson. "Kid, give me a mag." Henson fumbled with the chest rig and handed her a curved AK magazine. Sarah checked it, then handed the captured rifle to Kovic. Kovic stared at the weapon. It was battered, the wood stock chipped, smelling of cheap grease. "It's zeroed for a dead man," Sarah said. "Aim low. You have 30 rounds. Don't waste them on suppressive fire, semi-auto only. Pick your targets." Kovic took the rifle. The weight of it seemed to ground him. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, searching for a trace of the Auntie Sarah he knew. There was nothing left but steel. "We move in 2 minutes," Sarah announced, checking her watch. "We're going to breach the east exit and run the gauntlet to Annex B. I'll take point." "You take point?" Kovic asked, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. "I'm the team leader." "You're a target," Sarah said, turning away to check the door seal. "I'm a ghost. Try to keep up." Outside, the heavy thump-thump-thump of a DSHK heavy machine gun started up, tearing chunks out of the gym's exterior wall. Dust began to drift down from the rafters. The clock was ticking. The east exit of the gymnasium faced the central courtyard, 70 meters of manicured decorative gravel, low concrete benches, and a dry fountain. In peacetime, It was a smoking area. Now it was a killing field. Sarah stood by the door frame, peeking through the crack of the hinges. The morning sun was blinding, cutting sharp shadows across the kill zone. "Listen to me," Sarah said, her voice cutting under the roar of distant gunfire. "We bound. One man moves, one man covers. I go first to the fountain. Kovic, you cover me. When I'm set, you move. The rest of you, stay low and follow the sergeant's trace. Do not bunch up. One grenade kills you all if you bunch up." Kovic nodded, gripping the battered AK-47. He was sweating profusely, the salt stinging his eyes, but his hands were steady. "Copy, I cover." "Ready," Sarah whispered. "Move." She burst out of the doorway, keeping her profile low. She didn't run in a straight line. She zigzagged, erratic bursts of speed designed to throw off a lead angle. Crack thump. A bullet snapped past her ear, impacting the wall behind her. Sniper. Sarah threw herself behind the dry fountain, skinning her elbows on the concrete. "Sniper! Water tower! 11 o'clock!" she screamed. The crack thump interval was short. The shooter was close. Less than 300 meters. "I don't see him!" Kovic yelled from the doorway. He popped out, firing 2 rounds toward the tower, pop-pop. It was suppressing fire, inaccurate but loud enough to make the shooter duck. "Move," Sarah ordered. Kovic sprinted. He was heavy, slow, burdened by muscle mass that wasn't built for sprinting under fire. He dove next to Sarah behind the fountain, just as a round chipped the concrete rim inches from his head. The rest of the team, Miller, Davis, Gomez, and the terrified Henson, scrambled across the gap like frightened rabbits, diving into the dirt behind the low wall of the fountain. "He's dialed in," Kovic gasped, wiping dust from his face. "We can't move. The door to Annex B is still 40 meters out. He'll pick us off one by one." Sarah peeked around the rim, crack. The bullet spattered stone fragments into her cheek. She pulled back. She closed her eyes for a second, visualizing the geometry. The sniper was high, shooting down. The fountain offered hard cover, but it was an island. To get to the annex door, they had to cross open ground. "He's using a semi-auto," Sarah analyzed aloud, touching the bleeding cut on her cheek. "Recoil recovery is about 2 seconds. He's disciplined. He waits for the shot." "We need smoke," Miller cried out, curling into a ball. "We can't cross without smoke." "We don't have smoke," Sarah snapped. "We have physics." She turned to Kovic. "I'm going to draw his fire. When he engages me, you run for the keypad. You have 3 seconds before he resets." "What?" "No." Kovic shook his head. "That's suicide. I'm the leader. I should—" "You're too slow, Sergeant," Sarah said. It wasn't an insult. It was a tactical fact. "And you have the rifle. If I go down, you can still fight. If you go down, we all die." She didn't wait for his permission. She checked her boots. She gripped the P226. "Covering fire. Now." Kovic hesitated for a fraction of a second, then leaned out and unleashed 3 rounds at the tower. Sarah launched herself from the right side of the fountain. She didn't run toward the door. She ran parallel to the sniper, maximizing his traverse angle. She made herself a fast, lateral target, screaming to draw attention. Crack. The bullet kicked up dirt behind her heels. Miss. Crack. The second shot was closer, tugging at the fabric of her cargo pants. "Go, go, go!" Sarah yelled, changing direction, cutting back toward the annex wall. Kovic sprinted. He put his head down and charged the 40 meters like a linebacker blitzing the quarterback. Sarah saw the sniper's muzzle flash from the tower. He was adjusting for her erratic movement. She had to buy Kovic 1 more second. She stopped abruptly, standing still for a heartbeat. A stationary target is irresistible to a sniper. The sniper took the bait. He fired. Thwack! It felt like being hit with a baseball bat. The round grazed her upper left arm, tearing through the tricep muscle but missing the bone. The impact spun her around, knocking her into the dust, but the shot had been taken. Kovic slammed into the heavy steel door of Annex B. He punched the code into the keypad. 1995. The light turned green. "Get in!" Kovic roared, holding the door open. Miller and the others scrambled inside. Sarah gritted her teeth, pushing herself up with her good arm. The pain was a white-hot poker, but her legs still worked. She scrambled across the remaining 10 meters, staying low. Kovic reached out, grabbing her vest, and yanked her inside the dark concrete bunker. He slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt just as 3 rounds hammered against the steel exterior. Silence, heavy breathing. The annex was cool, lit by red emergency strips. Racks of M4 carbines, plate carriers, and helmets lined the walls. Sarah slid down the wall to a sitting position. She looked at her left arm. The sleeve was soaked in dark red. "You're hit," Kovic said, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. He looked at the wound, then up at her face. "Through and through," Sarah grunted, pressing her right hand over the hole to stem the bleeding. "Muscle only. I'm functional." Kovic stared at her. "You stopped. You stopped moving so he would shoot at you." "He was leading the target," Sarah said, closing her eyes for a moment to manage the pain spike. "I stopped. He fired where he thought I would be. He overcorrected. Basic geometry." Kovic sat back on his heels. He looked at the woman, the laundry lady, bleeding on the floor of the armory she had just delivered them to. "That wasn't geometry, Jenkins," Kovic whispered. "That was insane." "Are we going to talk, Sergeant?" Sarah opened her eyes. The shark gaze was dimmed by pain, but still sharp. "Or are we going to gear up and take back my base?" Kovic stood up slowly. He looked at his men, who were already tearing rifles from the racks, looking at Sarah with a mixture of awe and terror. "Miller, grab the med kit," Kovic ordered, his voice steady, authoritative. "Patch her up. The rest of you, suit up. Full battle rattle. We're going hunting." The air inside Annex B was heavy with the sound of Velcro ripping and bolts slamming home. In less than 3 minutes, Echo Team had transformed from a group of terrified gym-goers into a visually unrecognizable paramilitary unit. They wore mismatched plate carriers, grabbed whatever helmets fit, and loaded their vests with every magazine in the locker. Sarah stood by the door, tightening a tourniquet over the bandage on her left arm. She refused the heavy ceramic body armor. "Too slow," she had said. "If I get hit again, the plate won't matter." "Comms check," Kovic barked, adjusting his headset. "Static," Miller reported, tapping his ear. "The main repeater is down. I'm getting nothing but white noise on the squad net." "The saboteur used thermite on the main array," Sarah said, her voice tight with pain but steady. "He melted the localized jammer too, which means the enemy has comms and we don't." "We're blind," Davis muttered, racking the slide of his M4. "Not entirely," Sarah said. "There's a legacy SATCOM dish on the roof of the admin building. It's hardwired, distinct from the main network. It was installed for diplomatic contingencies." Kovic looked at her. "That's a quartermaster legend. Nobody's been on that roof in 3 years." "I serviced it last week," Sarah lied smoothly. "It works, but we have to manually align the azimuth to hit the bird." "Admin building is across the main thoroughfare," Kovic noted, looking at a tactical map on the wall. That's the center of the hive. Then we better move before they dig in, Sarah said. She kicked the door open. They moved out into the alleyway, the heat of the morning sun already baking the stone. The sounds of battle had shifted. The chaotic popping of small arms had been replaced by the rhythmic, suppressed thumping of organized squads clearing buildings. The enemy was disciplined. They reached the corner of the alley facing the admin building. Kovic raised a fist. Halt! Standard L-shape ambush, Kovic whispered, analyzing the street. Miller, take the saw, squad automatic weapon, and post up here. Suppress the windows. The rest of us will bound across. Belay that, Sarah cut in. Kovic whipped his head around. Excuse me? Look at the shadows in the second-floor windows, Sarah pointed with her knife hand. They aren't shooting. They're waiting. That's a funnel. You suppress the windows, they let you cross. Then they hit you from the basement vents with RPGs. It's a Grozny tactic. Kovic stared at the building. He saw nothing but empty windows. We don't have time to second-guess, Jenkins. We have to push. If you cross that street, you die, Sarah said simply. I'm giving the order. Kovic stepped forward, his stress fracturing into anger. Miller, set up base of fire. Miller hesitated, looking between his sergeant and the gray-haired woman who had just sprinted through sniper fire. Sarah didn't argue. She reached to her belt and pulled a flashbang grenade from her scavenged kit. She didn't throw it at the enemy. She threw it into the open sewer culvert 10 meters to their left. Bang! The explosion was muffled, but the result was instant. A scream erupted from the culvert, followed by a burst of uncontrolled AK-47 fire shooting up through the grate, aimed exactly where Kovic had planned to run. The basement vents were occupied. Kovic went pale. If they had run, they would have been cut in half from the ankles up. Sarah stepped past him, her eyes cold. Miller, keep the saw on the culvert. Davis, Gomez, smoke the street. We go. Through the side entrance, breach and clear. High tempo. Violence of action. She looked at Kovic. You want to lead, Sergeant? Then lead the rear guard. Keep them off our back. Kovic swallowed hard. His ego was dissolving in the acid of reality. Copy, he whispered. Smoke out, Davis yelled, hurling a canister. Gray smoke billowed into the street. Move, 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 Sarah commanded. She didn't run like a civilian anymore. She moved with the aggressive, predatory hunch of a Tier 1 operator. She hit the side door of the admin building, not waiting for the stack. She breached. Kick. Swing. Scan. The lobby was empty, but dusty boot prints led to the stairs. Stairwell, Sarah signaled. Check your corners. They moved up the stairs. On the second landing, a door swung open. An insurgent stepped out, raising a rifle. Sarah didn't break stride. She fired 2 shots from her pistol, one to the chest, one to the pelvis. The man crumbled. She stepped over him as he fell. Clear left, she shouted. Clear right. Gomez answered, his voice trembling but strong. They reached the roof access door. It was welded shut or stuck. Breaching charge, Kovic yelled, moving up with a strip of C4 he had grabbed from the annex. No time, Sarah said. She holstered her pistol and grabbed the fire axe mounted on the wall. She didn't hack at the lock. She swung the axe with her entire body weight, driving the spike into the hinge pins. Clang. Clang. She ripped the door open, the metal screaming. Roof! Go! They spilled out onto the gravel roof of the admin building. The sun was blinding. In the center, encased in a rusted housing, was the satellite dish. Miller, set up a perimeter, Kovic ordered, finding his voice again. Jenkins, get that dish talking. Sarah holstered the axe and ran to the dish. She knelt down, ripping the maintenance panel open. Her hands, usually steady, were slick with sweat and blood from her arm wound. "Come on, you piece of junk," she muttered. She found the azimuth crank. She had to manually hand-crank the heavy dish to align with the geostationary satellite. "Coordinates?" Kovich asked, kneeling beside her to cover the door. "I don't need coordinates," Sarah grunted, straining against the rusted gears. "I know where the bird is." She cranked it. Click, click, click. She pulled the handset from the housing. She keyed the mic. Any station. This is Trident 1 Actual, transmitting in the blind. Authentication. Whiskey X-ray 99. Declare emergency. Broken arrow. I say again, broken arrow." Kovich froze. He stared at her. "Trident?" he whispered. "That call sign hasn't been active since the Balkans." Sarah ignored him. She adjusted the squelch. Static, then a voice. Clear. American. "Trident 1 Actual, this is Overlord. We read you 5 by 5. Authentication confirmed. State your status." Kovich looked at the laundry lady. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Authentication confirmed. She wasn't just a contractor. She was a ghost who had just walked back into the living world. "Fob Granite is overrun," Sarah said into the handset, her voice devoid of emotion. "We have effective enemy control of the compound. Request immediate KAS. Danger close authorized." "Copy Trident. Assets are scrambling. ETA 20 mics. Can you hold?" Sarah looked at Kovich. She looked at the terrified faces of Echo Team. "We'll hold," she said. "Trident out." The roof was a trap. With the sun rising higher, the gravel surface was becoming a skillet, exposed to mortar fire from the surrounding hills. They had comms, but air support was still 20 minutes out, an eternity in a firefight. "We can't stay here," Sarah said, disconnecting the handset. "If they bracket this roof with 82mm mortars, we're pink mist. We need to clear the top floor and hold the stairwell. Create a choke point." Kovich nodded, his face grim. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hyper-focus of a man trying to keep his people alive. "Miller, take point with the saw. Davis, you're on his 6. Jenkins, you float. Call the shots." Sarah checked the load in her pistol. "Let's move. Violence of action. Don't let them set up." They moved back to the roof access door. Kovich kicked it open, and they flooded into the stairwell. The air inside was cool but smelled of cordite and unwashed bodies. The enemy was close. "Third floor is officer country," Kovich whispered. "Offices, conference rooms, lots of doors, lots of corners." "A kill house," Sarah corrected. They descended the stairs. At the third floor landing, Miller pushed the door open. The hallway stretched out, lined with closed oak doors. The fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing like angry hornets. "Slice the pie," Sarah hissed. Miller moved to the threshold, leaning out incrementally, weapon up, scanning a sliver of the hallway at a time. "Clear left, clear right, hallway is long." They moved in a stack, a human caterpillar of guns and armor. Sarah moved near the rear, her eyes scanning not just the front, but the ceiling tiles, the floorboards, the shadows. Contact. A door 20 meters down on the left swung open. A barrel poked out. "Front!" Miller roared, unleashing a burst from the M249 saw. BRT, BRT, BRT. The heavy rounds chewed through the doorframe, sending splinters flying. A scream echoed from the room, but it was a bait tactic. As Miller suppressed the door, 2 mercenaries leaned out from the intersection at the far end of the hall, firing AK-47s on full auto. Bullets snapped down the corridor, sparking off the walls. "Crossfire, cover!" Kovic yelled, grabbing Henson by the vest and dragging him into an open office. The team split. Miller and Davis dove into a conference room on the right. Kovic, Sarah, and Henson took the office on the left. The hallway between them was a fatal funnel, a zone of death where no one could survive. "They're professional," Sarah said, crouching behind a heavy mahogany desk. "Suppressing fire to pin us, flanking element moving up the stairwell. They want to box us in." "We have to push through," Kovic said, changing magazines. "If we stay in these rooms, they'll wall-bang us with RPGs." From the hallway, a metallic clink, clink, clink sound bounced off the tile floor. Sarah's head snapped up. She knew that sound. Every veteran knew that sound. "Grenade!" she screamed. A dark sphere rolled into the room, stopping just inches from the doorframe, right where Kovic was kneeling. Time didn't slow down, it accelerated. Kovic saw it. He froze. The fuse on an RGD-5 grenade is 3.5 seconds. 1 second had passed rolling. Sarah didn't dive for cover. Cover wouldn't save Kovic. She launched herself from behind the desk, sliding across the polished floor like a baseball player stealing home. As she passed the doorframe, she didn't try to pick it up. That was how you lost a hand. She kicked it, a perfect, brutal instep kick, driving her boot into the steel casing. The grenade flew back out into the hallway, bouncing off the opposite wall and skittering toward the enemy intersection. Boom! The explosion shook the building. Dust billowed into the room. A wet, agonizing scream erupted from the hallway, followed by the thud of bodies hitting the floor. "Move now! Into the smoke!" Sarah yelled, scrambling to her feet. Kovic was staring at the spot where the grenade had been. He looked at Sarah, his eyes wide. She had just saved his life again. "I said move, Sergeant!" They surged back into the hallway. The smoke was thick, stinging their eyes. Sarah raised her pistol, firing through the haze at the shapes moving at the end of the hall. Double tap, drop one. Miller stepped out from the conference room to join the push, bringing the saw up to his shoulder. "Suppressing!" Miller shouted, stepping into the center of the hall to lay down fire. He was brave. He was loud. He was a target. From a side office they hadn't cleared, a door they had passed, a gunman stepped out behind Miller. "Check 6!" Davis screamed. Too late. The gunman fired a single burst into Miller's back. The rounds punched through the back plate of his armor, or found the gap between the panels. Miller arched his back, the saw flying from his hands. He collapsed forward, face planting into the carpet. Sarah spun around. She didn't hesitate. She put 3 rounds into the gunman's face before he could fire again. "Man down! Man down!" Davis shrieked, grabbing Miller's drag handle. "Get him in the room! Get him in!" Kovic roared, firing wildly down the hall to keep the enemy heads down. They dragged Miller's limp body back into the conference room. Sarah kicked the door shut and wedged a chair under the handle. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the wet, gurgling sound of Miller trying to breathe through a punctured lung. Sarah looked at the blood pooling on the gray carpet. The buffer zone was gone. Now, they were trapped. The sound of a sucking chest wound is distinct. It is a wet, gasping rattle, like a straw at the bottom of an empty cup. In the silence of the barricaded conference room, it sounded like a siren. Miller lay on the conference table, his armor stripped off, his gray PT shirt soaked black with blood. His eyes were rolling back, lips turning blue. "Pressure! Keep pressure on it!" Kovic yelled, his hands slippery with his friend's blood. He was pressing a wad of gauze into the hole in Miller's back, but the blood kept welling up between his fingers. Sarah moved around the table. She didn't look at Miller's face. She looked at the mechanics of the injury. "Move your hands," Sarah ordered. "He's bleeding out," Kovich snarled, panic fraying his voice. "He's drowning," Sarah corrected. She shoved Kovich's hands aside with surprising strength. "It's a tension pneumothorax. Air is entering the chest cavity, collapsing the lung. You're sealing the exit, but he can't breathe." She ripped open a packet of trail mix she found in Henson's pocket, dumping the nuts on the floor. She tore the plastic wrapper into a square. "Tape," she demanded. Davis handed her a roll of medical tape from the kit. Sarah slapped the plastic wrapper over the wound on Miller's back, taping it on 3 sides, a makeshift occlusive dressing. "Breathe, Miller," she whispered. On the exhalation, blood and air burped out of the untaped side of the plastic. On the inhalation, the plastic sucked against the skin, sealing the hole. The rattling stopped. Miller took a jagged, agonizing breath. His color began to return slightly. "He's stable," Kovich breathed, wiping sweat from his eyes. Okay. We need a litter. Gomez, grab the curtain rods. We'll make a drag sled." "No," Sarah said. She stood up, wiping her bloody hands on her cargo pants. She walked to the door, checking the barricade. The handle was jiggling. The enemy was testing the defenses. "What did you say?" Kovich asked, standing up slowly. "We aren't taking him," Sarah said. She didn't turn around. "We can't carry a 200-pound casualty and fight our way to the roof. We'll be too slow. We'll be exposed." "We don't leave men behind," Kovich said. His voice was low, dangerous. The earlier respect he had found for her was evaporating, replaced by the indoctrinated rage of a soldier protecting his own. "That is the first rule. The first rule is the mission." Sarah turned to face him. "If we try to carry him, we lose the mobility advantage. The enemy will flank us in the stairwell. We all die. If we die, the radio on the roof isn't manned. If the radio isn't manned, the airstrike doesn't happen. And everyone, Miller included, dies anyway." "He's my man." Kovich stepped forward, chest to chest with her. "I am not leaving him to get his throat cut by those animals." "Then you kill him right now," Sarah said coldly. Kovich flinched as if she had slapped him. "What?" "If you drag him out there, you are killing him, just slower. And you're taking the rest of these boys with you." Sarah pointed to Henson and Gomez, who were watching with wide, terrified eyes. "Is that leadership, Sergeant? Sacrifice 4 healthy men for one who can't walk?" Kovich stared at her. He wanted to hit her. He wanted to scream. But behind the rage, the tactical part of his brain knew she was right. It was the math of war, cold, brutal calculus. "There's a server closet in the back," Sarah said, softening her tone just a fraction. "Reinforced door? No windows? We hide him there? We barricade him in? We finish the fight, clear the building, and come back for him with a medevac team." Kovich looked down at Miller. The young gunner was conscious now, watching them. He had heard everything. "Sarge," Miller wheezed. Kovich knelt down. "I'm here, buddy." "She's right," Miller whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "I can't run. Put me in the box." Kovich closed his eyes, a single tear cutting through the grime on his cheek. He nodded. They moved quickly. Kovich and Davis carried Miller into the narrow server closet at the back of the room. They propped him up against the racks of blinking lights. Sarah handed Miller a grenade. "Pin is straight. Don't pull it unless they open the door." Miller gripped the grenade with a white-knuckled hand. "Go get 'em, Sarge." "We're coming back," Kovich promised. 20 minutes. Hold on." They closed the heavy steel door. Kovich locked it. The room was silent again. The team stood there, lighter by one man, but heavier by 1,000 pounds of guilt. "We move," Sarah said. She didn't offer comfort. There was no time for it. Out the side window. Shimmy the ledge to the stairwell landing. Bypass the hallway ambush. Kovich grabbed his rifle. He looked at Sarah with a hatred that burned, but it was a focused hatred. He hated the situation, he hated the enemy, and he hated her for being right. "Lead the way," Kovich spat. Sarah climbed onto the windowsill and shattered the glass with the butt of her pistol. She looked back one last time at the locked closet door, then swung out into the precarious open air of the third-story ledge. The only way out was up. The ledge was 12 inches of decorative sandstone, suspended 3 stories above a concrete alleyway that was now swarming with enemy militia. The wind whipped around the corner of the administration building, hot and dry, carrying the smell of sulfur. Sarah moved first, her back pressed flat against the rough stucco wall. Her fingers dug into the slight recess of the window frame above. Every muscle in her core was tight, locking her center of gravity. "Don't look down," she whispered to Henson, who was shivering behind her. "Look at my boots. Step where I step." They shimmied sideways, a precarious human chain exposed to the world. Below, shouting erupted. An insurgent pointed up. Crack! A bullet chipped the stone inches from Sarah's knee. "Move faster!" Kovich yelled from the rear. He was firing one-handed with his pistol back toward the shattered window they had just exited, keeping the pursuers inside the building at bay. Sarah reached the corner, drainpipe, a thick, industrial steel tube, bolted to the wall. It led up to the roof parapet. "Up!" she ordered. "Go!" She grabbed Henson's harness and practically threw him onto the pipe. The boy scrambled up like a frightened monkey. Gomez followed, Davis next. Sarah waited for Kovich. He holstered his weapon and leaped for the pipe just as a burst of automatic fire raked the ledge where he had been standing. They hauled themselves over the parapet and rolled onto the gravel roof. They were back where they started, but on the south side, shielded by a large HVAC unit. Thump! Whoosh! The sound was unmistakable. A mortar launching. "Incoming!" Sarah tackled Henson, driving his face into the gravel. Boom! The round impacted the north side of the roof, near the satellite dish. Shrapnel pinged against the metal housing of the HVAC unit. The enemy mortar team in the hills had the roof zeroed. "We can't stay here!" Davis screamed, curling into a fetal position. "They're going to walk the rounds right on top of us." "We have to stay," Sarah spat, wiping gravel dust from her bleeding lip. "The birds are 15 minutes out. If we aren't here to pop smoke and guide them, they won't drop. And if we go back inside, we die in the hallway." "We can't guide anything if we're dead," Kovich roared. "That mortar is 600 meters out. I can't hit it with this piece of junk." He slammed the stock of the battered AK-47 against the ground. Sarah crawled to the edge of the parapet, keeping her head low. She pulled a small pair of compact binoculars from her cargo pocket. Civilian bird-watching gear, but high-quality glass. She scanned the ridgeline to the east. The heat shimmer made the hills dance, but she knew what to look for. Dust. A mortar kicks up dust when the base plate settles. There. A puff of gray against the brown rocks. "Target identified," Sarah said, her voice dropping into a monotone cadence. "Grid 844291, ridgeline, 2 o'clock. Cluster of 3 boulders." She turned to Kovich. "Get up here, Sergeant." "I have iron sights, Jenkins," Kovich argued, crawling forward nonetheless. The effective range of an AK is 300 meters. That target is double that. The rifle will do it if you do your job, Sarah. Prone position. Rest the barrel on the wall, bone support. Relax your grip. Kovic settled into position. He looked through the notch of the rear sight. The target was a speck. I can't see them, he grunted. I am your eyes, Sarah whispered, bringing the binoculars up. Elevation. Hold 2 feet above the center boulder. Wind is right to left, 10 miles an hour. Hold 1 body width right. Kovic adjusted. He was sweating, the salt stinging his eyes. He took a breath, let it out, and paused at the bottom of the exhale. Sarah commanded. Bang! Sarah watched the impact. Low, 3 feet, ricochet off the lower rock. The mortar team on the ridge was reloading. She could see them dropping the next round into the tube. Adjust up, top of the front sight post level with the boulder peak. Same windage. Kovic gritted his teeth. Copy. Send it. Bang. Hit, Sarah said calmly. 1 down. He's crawling. The loader is panicked. He's trying to move the tube. Fire for effect. Same hold. Rapid fire. Kovic didn't hesitate. He trusted her voice more than his own eyes. Bang, bang, bang. Through the binoculars, Sarah watched the second man drop. The mortar tube, struck by a lucky round or knocked over by the falling body, tipped sideways, spilling its lethal payload harmlessly into the dirt. Target neutralized. Sarah lowered the glasses. Mortar is down. Kovic rolled onto his back, staring at the sky. He let out a harsh, jagged laugh. I'll be damned. Don't celebrate, Sarah said, checking her watch. That was the easy part. Now we have to hold this roof against the infantry moving up the stairs until the cavalry arrives. She looked at the team. They were battered, bleeding, and terrified. But they were looking at her. Not at Kovic. At her. Davis, prep the smoke grenades, Sarah ordered. Red smoke for enemy location, green for friendlies. But do not pop them until I say. If you pop too early, the wind takes it, and the pilots bomb the wrong target. Roger that, Davis said, pulling the pins on the canisters but holding the levers tight. Gomez, watch the roof access door, Sarah continued. If it opens, you empty your magazine. Don't aim, just spray. What about you? Kovic asked, sitting up and reloading the AK. Sarah pulled her knife from her boot. Her pistol was down to 1 magazine. I'm going to make sure we don't get flanked from the fire escape. She moved to the south edge. The sun was fully up now, baking the roof. High above, a silver glint caught the light. A jet. Overlord to Trident. The radio on Kovic's vest crackled. Viper 1-1 is on station. Angels 10 requesting target designation. Sarah grabbed the handset from Kovic. Viper, this is Trident. Danger close. I say again, danger close. Enemy force is inside the wire. We are marking friendly position with green smoke. Anything outside the smoke is a valid target. She looked at Davis. Pop green. Thick emerald smoke began to hiss and billow around them, creating a desperate island of safety in a sea of violence. The green smoke hissed, creating a swirling emerald fog that stung the throat. High above, the roar of jet engines tore the sky apart. FA-18 Super Hornets entering the hold pattern, their afterburners sounding like tearing canvas. Viper is inbound, Sarah yelled over the noise. 2 minutes to payload drop. Gomez, positioned at the roof access door, suddenly screamed. Contact! Don't shoot! Don't shoot! He lowered his rifle, stepping back in horror. The heavy steel door didn't burst open with a breach charge. It swung open slowly, screeching on dry hinges. Out of the stairwell darkness stepped Farid, the base's cultural advisor and interpreter. The man who had smiled at Sarah in the chow hall for 6 months. He wasn't smiling now. He wore a tactical vest over his dish dasha and held a pistol pressed hard against the temple of a man he was dragging. Miller. The gunner was barely conscious, his feet dragging through the gravel, blood soaking the makeshift dressing on his back. He had been pulled from the closet, beaten, and hauled up 3 flights of stairs as a bargaining chip. "Stop!" Kovich roared, raising his rifle. "Let him go, Farid!" "Put the guns down!" Farid screamed back, his voice cracking. He shook Miller violently, making the wounded man groan. "I kill him! I swear I kill him right now!" The geometry of the standoff was a nightmare. Farid was using Miller's body as almost total cover. Only the top of the traitor's head and his right elbow were visible. "Hold your fire," Sarah ordered, her voice low and dangerous. She kept her P226 raised, aiming at the tangled pair. "Call off the birds," Farid shouted, looking up at the circling jets. "Get on the radio! Tell them to abort, or I paint this roof with his brains!" Kovich looked at Sarah, his eyes wild with desperation. "Jenkins, we have to talk to him. We can't let him kill Miller." "He's already dead, Sergeant," Sarah said. She didn't look at Kovich. Her eyes were locked on Farid's face, specifically the T-box, the triangle formed by the eyes and the nose. Farid knows he's dead. He just wants company. "No!" Kovich stepped between Sarah and the target. "Put the radio down. We can negotiate." "There is no negotiation with a dead man," Sarah said, stepping sideways to clear her line of fire. "Farid, look at me." The traitor's eyes flicked to Sarah. He recognized her, the laundry woman, the ghost. "You!" Farid sneered. "You did this. You should be scrubbing floors. And you should be loyal," Sarah replied calmly. "Miller is bleeding out, Farid. He's heavy. Your arm is getting tired." It was a psychological probe. Farid flinched, adjusting his grip on the pistol. In that microsecond of movement, Miller's head lolled forward, exhausted, creating a 2-inch gap between his ear and Farid's cheekbone. "I said abort the—" Sarah didn't wait for the sentence to end. She didn't breathe. She didn't hesitate. She squeezed the trigger. Crack. The sound was small compared to the jets, but the result was absolute. The bullet didn't hit Farid in the head. It struck Miller's trapezius muscle, the meaty part of the shoulder, passing cleanly through and impacting Farid's throat directly behind him. It was a calculated through-and-through shot, a sacrificial geometry. Miller screamed, his body jerking violently from the impact. The sudden motion threw Farid off balance as his windpipe disintegrated. The traitor's pistol discharged harmlessly into the sky as he clutched his throat, blood spraying black in the green smoke. He collapsed backward, gargling on his own destruction. Miller fell forward into the gravel, writhing in fresh pain. "Miller!" Kovich dropped his rifle and sprinted to his friend. Sarah walked forward, her weapon still raised. She didn't run. She walked to where Farid lay twitching. She put one final round into his forehead. "Secure the door," she told Gomez, who was staring at her as if she were a demon. Kovich was pressing his hands onto Miller's shoulder. "You shot him! You shot my man!" Sarah ejected her empty magazine and loaded her final one. She knelt down beside them. "I shot through him," Sarah corrected, her voice devoid of apology. "Look at the wound. High shoulder. No bone, no artery. It hurts like hell, but he's alive. If I had waited 5 more seconds, Farid would have put a hollow point in his brain." Miller looked up, his face gray, tears streaking through the dust. He looked at the dead traitor, then at Sarah. He nodded weakly. She got him, Sarge. Miller wheezed. I'm okay. I'm okay. Kovich looked at the bullet hole in Miller's shoulder, then at the dead insurgent. He realized the impossible precision required to make that shot, to intentionally wound a friend to kill an enemy hidden behind him. It was a level of violence that Kovich, a trained Tier 1 operator, couldn't comprehend. You're a monster, Kovich whispered. I'm the one who gets you home. Sarah stood up. She grabbed the handset. Viper, this is Trident. Target is marked. Green smoke is friendly. Everything south of the admin building is cleared hot.